What he must do in that case is to change the concentration on breathing into scrutinizing of mind and matter in terms of impermanence and so on as mentioned above. Then, by the power of intuitive scrutiny alone, he may proceed directly to the last tetrad, all of which will be discussed in its proper place. So anyone who wishes to develop insight directly does not need the absorptions. He needs just a limited degree of concentration to serve as a basis for the insight. Because he is aiming at the cessation of suffering and does not care for any special ability or quality such as higher supernormal powers, abhina, or the like, this technique of scrutinizing in order to develop insight will be explained in detail later, stages 18-19. Now we shall clarify the process of calming the bodily formation for straight-out tranquility meditation. Even while practicing the calming of the bodily formation, there is a calming or straightening of wrong beliefs or views regarding the being, me, mine. It is, however, no more than a simple knowledge of impersonality, of the non-existence of ego, self, soul. Since the meditator merely perceives the body as body, the breathing as breathing, the mind aware of the breathing as mind, and awareness of the whole process as awareness, the meditator, perceiving the body as body, has no sense of me or mine with regard to the various phenomena that arise. Nor does he identify himself with them. He views things rightly as mere natural phenomena, not conceiving any of them as a being, self, person, or soul, which might be the basis for liking or disliking. He can, therefore, get rid to some degree of covetousness and disappointment. The main point here is that even though the practice is exclusively tranquility meditation, it can to some extent do away with attachment to wrong views such as the idea of being, self, and the like. Since the development of concentration is complementary to insight meditation,
which destroys such wrong views completely, this only happens, however, if there is already some right understanding, samadhi. We shall, therefore, deal further with the practice for calming the bodily formation by tranquility meditation. But first we shall discuss in detail how the meditator can attain concentration up to the stage of the absorptions. Chapter 5, 8 Steps to Absorption. At this point we must pause to summarize the entire practice. The course of practice from beginning to end, up to the attainment of the noble paths and fruits, Arya Magaphala, may be divided into 8 major steps, as follows. 1. Counting. Gone counting is used to determine the length of the breath and also to control the breathing by way of experiencing its beginning, middle, and end. It is practiced while the breathing is still gross and applies to stages 1, 2, and 3. 2. Connecting. Anyabandhana. Connecting is the practice of following the breathing closely and without interruption. Tying the mind to it with mindfulness, it is done without counting and without following or marking the beginning, middle, and end of the breaths. Connecting applies in stage 3 in particular. 3. Contact. Dhyana. Here mindfulness is directed to the single point where the breath contacts the skin surface, in order to bring about the arising there of the acquired image or sign, adhanimitta. It applies to stage 4. 4. Fixing. Thapana. In this step the mind is firmly fixed on the point where the acquired sign has arisen in order that this acquired sign may in due course be converted into a distinct and well-established counterpart sign, Hypanimitta, which in its turn leads to the attainment of full concentration or absorption. Fixing is relevant in stage 4. 5. Observing. Salakana. The meditator observes mind and matter, developing insight in order to perceive them as impermanent, unsatisfactory, and devoid of selfhood. It applies from stage 5 to the end.
6. Turning away. Vivatana. This is the technique for turning away from or getting rid of the defilements or impurities and acquiring in their place good qualities, starting with dispassion or detachment, viraga, and continuing right up to the attainment of the noble paths. It applies in stages 13 to 16. 7. Purifying. Parasati. This is the gaining of the noble fruit, destroying the impurities, which is commonly known as deliverance, vimudi, or deliverance by destruction, samukkata vimudi. It is the result of developing anapanasati according to the last stage. 8. Looking back. Pipassan. This consists in looking back on or reviewing the destruction of the defilements or fetters and the fruit gained thereby, the meditator contemplates the noble fruit while mindfully breathing. Of these 8 steps, the last 4 deal with intuitive insight and the noble paths and fruits. The third and fourth, contact and fixing, are immediately concerned with calming the bodily formation. Counting is simply the establishing of mindfulness on the long and short breaths in stages 1 and 2. Connecting means carrying on mindfulness uninterruptedly with each in and out breath. Since success in stages 3 and 4 depends on an understanding and proper practice of stages 1 and 2, it is necessary that stages 1 to 4 be considered and explained afresh in such a way as to show how they are related to the first 4. Of these 8 steps or techniques, the first technique, counting, serves 2 purposes. It is used firstly to discover the length of the breaths, and secondly to prevent the mind from wandering from the breathing. To be of use, counting must coexist with the control of the mind and be in harmony with it. The meditator should count at least up to 5 but not beyond 10. He prefers just to estimate the length of the breaths rather than actually counting. He may do so in the way explained, in stages 1 and 2. In any case, he must do it with the proper state of mind.
Avoiding the extremes of sluggishness and excessive effort, counting is an effective means of facilitating concentration, though rather coarse compared with the technique of estimating. Each time the meditator takes an in or out breath, he counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the last number coinciding with the end of the breath. Even if he counts right up to 10 by saying, mentally, 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10, he must exercise judgment so that the counting ends at the end of each in and out breath. And whichever number he chooses to count to, he must so arrange things that the end of the counting coincides with the end of the breath. It is best to count up to either 5 or 10 rather than to intermediate numbers. Obviously, the technique of counting is used only when the breathing is naturally or normally long and is experienced in terms of beginning, middle, and end. The reason for not counting less than 5 or more than 10 is this: if the meditator stops short of 5, the intervals in counting, between each number and the next, are long enough to give the mind a chance to wander from the object, the breathing. Counting less than 5 is too coarse, too slack, and is not appreciably different from merely concentrating on the breath in terms of beginning, middle, and end. If on the other hand the meditator goes beyond 10, he has to count too quickly and will become flurried. Being lost in counting, his mind will once again deviate from the object. It is undesirable to be too sluggish or too hurried. To count in intervals excessively long or short, these faults affect the mind adversely and confuse it. This is the technique of counting. The meditator should experiment with it in its various forms. This trains the mind and keeps it in trim. It also helps it to get to know itself better. The technique of estimating the length of the breaths without counting has already been explained amply in stages 1 and 2. Dealing with concentration on long and
short breathing. It has to be realized that this practice of estimating the lengths of the breaths must always be done with mindfulness and equanimity. The meditator must be neither impatient and overeager nor sluggish and lax. In the first case, the mind is scattered and so cannot concentrate on the object. In the second, the mind has the chance to wander off the object. The breath is just like a small bird, which, if caught and held in the hand only loosely, will slip through the fingers, and if held too tightly, will die. In either case, there is no hope of having the bird alive. The same holds true of the meditator who fails to avoid these two extremes. Both the technique of counting and that of estimating the length of the breaths without counting are covered by the single term, gone. Both techniques are to be practiced while contemplating the breathing, long or short. Both are to be practiced from the first applying of mindfulness up to the stage of following the course of air. Once the breathing has become to some extent smoothed and calmed down, such a coarse technique as counting is no longer appropriate. Another more subtle technique is then required, namely concentration on the breathing at just one particular point. This technique is dealt with in detail under Contact, Sovanna. Here we discuss it only in brief and only insofar as it overlaps with counting. When the meditator finds it no longer necessary to follow the breathing all the time, because the mind has become quite tranquil, he He should concentrate on just the single point where the air touches his nostril or lip as it passes in and out. He should count or estimate while attending to that point. To understand this clearly, we must return to the analogy of the cradle. Let us picture the nurse sitting near the post at the foot of the cradle. The child in the cradle is not yet asleep, nor is it inclined to sleep. It seems to be trying to climb out of the cradle.